And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk, State Farm Arena, Atlanta, Georgia. Michigan State loses 70-64 in the South Regional Final, the Elite Eight. Very exciting game, very exciting atmosphere. Auburn very good on defense, and they kept Michigan State at bay the whole way. Michigan State had chances to make little runs, cut it to 5 late in the first half, cut it to 5 early in the second half, and were never able to sustain the run. And something we talked about all year, perimeter shooting from the backcourt was something that escaped Michigan State today. Late going, Akins hit 3, brought him back, made the score more respectable. But at key moments, key stretches of the game, Jackson Kohler shot well from 3, but no one really joined him out there. And against Auburn, it's so hard to go inside against them. They needed to have some perimeter punch. They didn't get it tonight.
Yeah, and I think Michigan State did a nice job in the second half of the season, the Big Ten play, of changing the narratives to some extent. Not really, because Tom Izzo always talked about it being the white elephant in the room. But, you know, guys like Trey Holloman and Jace Richardson and Jaden Akins and got good shots tonight. Yeah. I want to qualify that because like a lot of their shots they took tonight were contested. The problem is when they got open shots when they're in transition or whatnot, they didn't go down. And you know, Trey Holloman had a really rough night shooting 0 for 10. He's a guy that you expect, and he has come up big and clutch with open threes, transition threes, and he's a guy that's done it before. So you're not asking him to do something he hasn't done before, and he was devastated afterwards. And his teammates picked him up in the locker room. But he was one of the guys that, you know, obviously he feels like he let his team down tonight. But Auburn played really good defense, and they have, you know, I just wrote about this a minute ago, but Michigan State's played athletic teams. They've played teams that have some size. But Auburn brings it all together. They've got length, athleticism, and tonight I think they're well coached. They played good defense, and you listen to what Bruce Pearl said afterwards at the podium. He said he felt like for his team that first game against Michigan and the Sweet 16 was a wake-up call. They didn't play well, and he felt like they couldn't have a 17-0 run against Michigan State, a team like Michigan State, unless they executed better on offense than they did in that game against Michigan. And I really think you can say they didn't shoot well or they took a couple bad shots, but they didn't take as many bad shots as they normally take. They got the ball inside to Janai Broome early. They took a lot of good mid-range jumpers with some good screening in that first half when they were building that lead. And I think Auburn kind of got away from being, they're the clowning around type of team that I thought they might be in this game, but they got all the kinks out against Michigan, and they knew they had to be better against Michigan State, and they were better. And it seemed like every time Michigan State was on the verge of making or turning the corner, you'd see offensive rebound, second chance point. And there wasn't a ton of second chance points in this game. I went and looked at the box score and thought, oh, there's going to be a lot of Auburn second chance points. There wasn't, but it seemed like every time Auburn got an offensive rebound, it led to like a huge three.
Some of those were loose balls that were loose that might not be coming off a rebound, but one or two of those.
50-50 type balls, and those are the things that, like Michigan State's done a great job of getting to 50-50 balls. But when you have a team like Auburn that's big, physical, long and athletic, and they're going and scrapping hard for 50-50 balls, that's a problem, especially when they got them. And I think that's one area, where a crowd and a heavily partisan crowd can will a team to more of those type of victories. Yeah. I think you can say how do you quantify how much a heavily pro Auburn crowd, what does that mean to Auburn in terms of points? I don't know what it means in terms of points, but I think that urgency, the collective will of a crowd, they can lift you when you need it, and it's almost like a gladiator type contest where, and I've seen this happen with Michigan State countless times where a guy gets a loose ball or dives into the crowd, and a pro Michigan State crowd will, get into a frenzy over something like that, and it'll kind of carry the team. And I felt there was some instances tonight where this really good crowd, pro Auburn crowd, was vocal, was loud, especially when they're playing well in defense and doing some of the dirty work. And I think it fueled Auburn, and I think that's the effect the crowd had on their team.
Helps you get loose balls, helps you play good defense, and Auburn was good in those areas tonight. And I had a lot of vocal support. Michigan State had good support too for the people that were here. Broome was strong down, early on, posting up Kohler, 2 or 3 early field goals. Michigan State had a plan to put different defenders on him, and that they did what they could against Broome. Broome was very good, had good touch. He hasn't always had good touch like that. But Michigan State, they end up from three-point range, 7 out of 23, which is pretty respectable. However, I mean, for the game, that's 30%, which is a little less than 33%, which is production, the productivity line. But Michigan State was, like I said, they finished 7 of 23, but at one point they were 3 of 17
right.
with about 7 minutes to go, and you're down 11. It might have been 6 minutes to go. So 3 of 17 is what they really were when the deficit was what they had to go into crisis management mode about late in the game. And Holloman, Akins missing those shots. And, we said through the course of the season that, at least I did, you and I, we were talking about things. Whenever Michigan State loses, whenever their season comes to an end, it's likely going to be a situation in which Jaden Akins didn't have a 4 for 6 3-point range game, or Jace Richardson didn't have a 4 for 6 3-point range game like Richardson had against Mississippi. That's what they needed to move on. Kohler ends up 3 out of 4 from 3-point range. He came through. We said he was an X factor that was slowly developing into the type of range shooter that you would need to win a regional final. He delivered that. Akins and Holloman have been very good in a lot of ways all year, and they're down on themselves, and I don't mean to pile on, but if those guys would have picked this night to shoot like Kohler, they would have won this game, Paul.
Well, here's the other thing, too, and it's not just, Jace Richardson had a rough shooting night. He missed some open threes as well, so it's not just those two guys. But the problem is for Michigan State in this game, they didn't shoot well from three, but they didn't augment that by getting shots at the rim or mid-range jumpers. And one of the things that Michigan State, you can say that they've been a rough shooting team, and they have been, but there hasn't been
not in March.
But there hasn't been many nights where
until tonight,
where all your primary guards struggled, and that was the problem tonight. And not only that, it was exacerbated by the fact that Michigan State couldn't get slashing buckets to the basket, and that had to do with Auburn's length. So Auburn's defensive length on the interior made it necessitated Michigan State shooting better from three.
Yes,
and it was also an issue for Michigan State's guards. They had to work hard to get open away from the ball. I felt like Auburn did as good a job. I felt like Jace Richardson was getting the John Tonje treatment that Michigan State gave John Tonje when he played at Michigan State, where Akins was daisy fresh and he was just, bird dogging him all over the place. And that's what happened with, not just Richardson but Akins as well at times. And I felt like those guards, they had to work as hard as they've had to work all season long to get open shots. So sometimes when you get those instances, when you finally do get open shots, sometimes they don't go down. I felt like that was the case all night long. And Auburn's a pretty good defensive team, but they took it to a different level tonight, and that with the improvement in their offensive execution, and some of the stuff that they did, it really helped them out. And then we're still only talking about like a 6-point loss, which is a credit to Michigan State and the scrappy nature of this team to shoot 34% or whatever they shot, and to only lose by 6 points to the number 1 overall seed in the tournament, who's playing in its own backyard. Disappointing way to end the season, but I also think for this basketball team, it's it's going to be for a long time for me one of my favorite teams to cover. Maybe the favorite, just because of what they overcame throughout the course of the year, losing so many starters, not very high expectations, but also like what they did to reestablish the brand of the program, and to reinforce program values that. Like we talk about this all the time in the transactional, mercenary college sports world that we live in. It's harder and harder to connect with your team. This team made it very easy to connect with, and it's going to be interesting to see where they go in the future, because the guys that are coming back, they want to keep this culture alive. It was special to them, and once you experience that, I think you want to take stewardship of that and move it forward. So, a great season for Michigan State, and fans need to be supportive of these guys because they gave everything they had this year.
I think they will be. And make sure to give us a thumbs up here. Give us a like here on the channel. Subscribe to the channel. Go to SpartanMag.com. Become a SpartanMag.com subscriber. We'd love to have you over there. Checking out as we go into spring football, whatever access we have over there. We'll be breaking down the incoming, what Michigan State has this spring from the portal. We'll be looking at them and what they did last year and how they fit in this year. But first of all, I want to say, as you know, Michigan's recycling rate has fallen from 90% to 73% in recent years. Michiganders are squandering $105 million each year by not taking back their bottles and cans. That's hurting our environment. So help your environment, help yourself, help your beaches, lakes, and roads. Take them back. Take them back. A message from Shoepan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. A few more things about this game tonight. The defense for Auburn was very good. Michigan State only had 9 turnovers. They had a few early on, a couple for touchdowns, which hurt. But in the face of excellent defense, and Bruce Pearl's teams always play really good defense, Michigan State was getting bumped off their spots and couldn't get anything inside. Weren't going to post up much until later when Kohler did it. But Michigan State continuously, through the first 25 minutes of the game, was all of a sudden getting down to 5 seconds left on the shot clock. Auburn was doing a good job taking away primaries, being physical, making it tough for Michigan State to execute. And Michigan State was always in late shot clock situations, but still managed to get decent three-pointers. There weren't a lot of really terrible shots. They would get real late and still would end up with semi-open three-pointers. These three-pointers when they were 3 of 17, not a lot of those were harried, max covered shots. There were some good open shots. So it's not like they got locked down for the full shot clock. At the very end, Michigan State was still getting open shots and didn't get them to fall. Kohler, great game for him. 3 of 4 from three-point range. In a different kind of way, reminds me of A.J. Granger, his junior year, regional final, St. Louis, when they beat Kentucky. That was a coming-out party for Granger. Kohler tonight, excellent on offense. Patient in the post in the second half. I think that he was kind of, getting a little bit, was not confident about going and challenging Broom in the low post early in the game. Second half, he just went to, jump hook, did some things. He can build off of this. He can go into the offseason feeling good about himself. He's very crushed right now, one of many tearful players. But Kohler, I think he can build off this.
Yeah, and I think he was actually willing to talk about a lot of stuff after this, but not basketball related. From a personal standpoint of what this team meant to him and what being part of this program meant to him. I think it's, when I mentioned the word stewardship, both he and Carson Cooper are guys that you would expect, and you never know what's going to happen roster-wise in this climate. So I'm not going to say these guys are captain material, but guys that are coming back, they very much, and those are two of them, Carson Cooper and Jackson Kohler, who really want to keep this going in terms of what this was like. Because I think Jackson Kohler, I've talked about him being wound tight before, but I think this is a guy that this year, it wasn't just always chip on the shoulder. I'm going to, prove the world wrong. Jackson Kohler versus everybody, which is something that way he fuels himself. But it was more like, I think he had more fun and joy playing this year with this team. And that's, I don't use that word joy lightly because there's other guys that had fun playing basketball, I'm not going to say for the first time, but they really enjoyed their teammates. They enjoyed the season. They even enjoyed getting coached up and pushed to be better than they were. And he's one guy. I was really impressed with what he did today. Obviously the threes. That's something that he can really kind of take his game to the next level. Needs to a little bit because he's a little bit undersized. But his post moves in the lane and being able to hit those where it wasn't like a gimmick type move. It was a straight up hook shot. Even that little fadeaway move that he had late in the game. That was kind of cool, but he had jump hooks before that, and it's good to see him do that. And I'm sure psychologically that's going to help him going in the offseason because he didn't have to worry about someone, digging down and poking it away. He had some difficult matchups, not easy, but he was able to score against good defense. And Auburn's players at the podium afterwards were complimentary of Michigan State's bigs. They said that Michigan State has great bigs. And that's something that Michigan State fans probably don't think of. But like I said the other night, I think some of the best Michigan State teams have a collection of bigs that can do what you need them to do, but they're kind of underrated or overlooked for whatever reason. And Michigan State doesn't have a guy that's going to be necessarily a double guy every night. But Kohler was that guy tonight, and he was really good. And I thought Zafawa played well at times.
Commanded his space, made some decent things. But came close to some key finishes. Michigan State was close to some key plays here and there, just scored it away from them. Izzo interestingly said that the bigs, in terms of ball screen defense, were making mistakes that were uncharacteristic, things that they usually have covered. Some of those times when Auburn had the screen roll, pocket pass for dunks, 2 or 3 of those, Izzo was, we were sitting across from the bench and he was yelling corrections and so forth. So there were some things that were not A game in terms of Michigan State's ball screen coverages. Of course, they didn't shoot A game. Rebounding ended up being about even, and against a really good Auburn team with a lot of live bodies out there.
But they had to work. I mean, that's the thing that, like, for defensive rebounds, Michigan State, like, it was even, but there wasn't a lot of clean rebounds. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just felt like Michigan State had to really fight for a lot of rebounds, and when you don't have clean rebounds, and Auburn's a big team in their athletics, so, and they wanted to rebound with Michigan State, but when you don't have a lot of clean rebounds, then it's really hard to get that transition game like really going. When you have to fight or you have to corral and wait, so someone's not going to pull it away from you, it's the timing of that transition gets thrown off.
I thought that Auburn did a good job when Michigan State had transition pushes. They did a really good job finding Akins, because Akins can shoot threes in transition, and they were on him on the catch in those situations. Most of his three-pointers were maybe later in the offense on some inside-out things and things in that category. But they were smart. They were well coached. They knew who they needed to cover, and they did a pretty good job of it. Fears did a good job pushing here and there, drawing some fouls. Had a big conversion on a layup. I think was the one that cut it to 5 points late in the first half. Played some pretty good defense. Jace Richardson, to the rim. Holloman, Akins, Richardson had trouble in there with that defense. As you get further in the tournament, you're going to face better and better defenses, longer people, taller people, more athletic people, stronger people, and the rim protection today was different. Yeah. And I think that had an impact on Michigan State. Missing some runners, off the glass, falling out off the glass, and Auburn had something to do with that.
Yeah, I even think like some of the post-entry feeds, when you have two bigs like that, and they're wide, they're not just like tall, you could see like Michigan State guards were not used to it. Like on some of their post-entry feeds, they were like kind of like, is my guy there? It's different. And Michigan plays big, but it's a different type of thing. These guys from Auburn are a lot more physical. There's a lot more rim protection, and they're big guys. Even there's a lot of length out there.
They start two centers. They call them both centers. Broom and Cardwell. I've never seen a team start two centers since Kentucky had the Twin Towers, Bowie, and I can't remember what the other guy, Mel Turpin.
But they're not like necessarily plotters. And when Michigan State was trying to get back in transition, you saw there's instances where like a Carson Cooper or Jackson Kohler sprinting to get down the floor, and I felt like those guys from Auburn were in good enough position where you couldn't throw a pass over the top. They were long, and so it wasn't like
just enough traffic.
So you talk about they're two centers, which is rare, but they're athletic enough to do it, which is also rare.
And so the margin for error was so minute, and you have to be so sharp to execute against this Auburn team. Michigan State didn't get that done. Richardson missed some shots. Richardson gave great effort. So after the game, we asked him about the decision coming up, and he said it's going to be a decision. It's going to be a hard decision. You just watched the video, and a lot of you have seen it here on the channel. He said it's going to be a hard decision. And it looks to me like they haven't, as a family, they've not talked about it much. I'm guessing that Jason has said, let's give him space, let him focus on the season. We'll talk about it later, because he was saying it's going to be a hard decision. He loves this team, loves playing for Coach, as he said. He said going to the Final Four is a goal that he had, that he wants to have on his college resume. And he says it's going to be a hard decision. And I gained the sense that they haven't thought about it yet. Is that the sense you were getting?
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to make the decisions that he makes for the right reasons. Whatever he decides is best for him. I think it's going to be an informed type of thing. It's not like the family doesn't have experience with the NBA.
Sure.
I mean, his dad played in it. And it's not like you look at a guy like Tom Izzo. He's going to want what's ever best for Jace Richardson. So I mean, that's part of it too. We talk about the kid making the decision, but you go back to Jaren Jackson, who, if Tom Izzo begged him to come back, he probably would have come back, but Izzo pushed him out the door because it was best for him. So we can talk about, I mean, the conversation is going to be, can Michigan State pay him enough money NIL-wise? Or, what does he want to do? But ultimately, if Izzo thinks it's best for him to go to the NBA, that's going to be a factor there too. But I don't know. I can make an argument. I think if I was making an argument right now, you guys wouldn't like me. So
okay.
I'm not going to make it.
Sure. I mean, he's a guy that had an injury in his past, so that's going to creep into it. And how soon you get to that next contract?
Well, and he has the maturity level. The people are going to be saying, "Well, look how well it worked for his dad," and so I'm going to probably tick people off right now a little bit, but they'll say, "Look how well it worked for his dad." Well, his dad didn't have development to the extent that Jace has it. So he's a lot more polished of a player, a lot more mature. He's an old soul, and I don't think he's, the whole pro game or that culture, that lifestyle isn't going to be. I don't think it's going to be too big for him because he's not like your average 18-year-old.
No.
He's mature beyond his years. He's not a guy that I think is too trusting or anything like that. He doesn't have people trying to manipulate him or use him for financial reasons. So the decisions that he's going to make is going to be, I think, probably a good one on his part, but he's going to have to, he's probably going to swing back and forth, but it's a tough deal.
And we don't know. We're not in that living room. We don't know what they're going to say. And Jason Richardson, I was there at his press conference when he turned pro, and he was sad, but it was the right thing to do for him and his family at that time. But he also, I think he would, I've not asked him this, but when they talk amongst themselves in the living room and so forth, what does he say about his sophomore year? Was that one of the greatest years of his life, winning that national title? And what's that worth? Right. And in this day and age, you get paid $1 million, way more than $1 million, for a second year in college.
Yeah, and you look at Michigan State's roster, and this is close, but there's a lot of people that are maybe old eligibility-wise, but gained a lot of experience this year. I talked about Kohler and Cooper just a bit ago, but Jeremy Fears is young. He's a freshman, so
getting better all the time.
There's not, you look at there's how many teams in the country that are as good as Michigan State to start 2 freshmen. I know that Jeremy's a redshirt freshman or whatever, but he didn't play a lot last year, and
none.
But so you've got a team that is this good that could have a lot of its core players back, and the level of development that took place in the program. Plus, you got to get
Duke. I guess Duke is the one that starts freshman. That's pretty good. But go ahead.
Right. But they're the exception.
Exceptional.
And I've been going and looking at some rosters because we've talked a lot about. I've been thinking about Jesse McCulloch and stuff like that. You talk about redshirting, and it's becoming more common in college basketball. But there's the guy, Jesse McCulloch, who had a really good offseason. I think he could really do some things for Michigan State, and I can see Michigan State being a really good rebounding team still. I'm not sure what's going to happen with some other guys, but you got a core nucleus of guys that want to be good teammates, that care about each other, that love each other, and I'm sure as much as those guys care about winning, that this is going to fuel a lot of those guys in the offseason. But you could have a core group of guys coming back, and if that development continues, that level of coaching and buy-in and everything, this is a great year for Michigan State. But it could be a special year next year under the right circumstances.
And they'll have to communicate and find out what's going on in the portal, because there's going to be a lot of programs coming after these guys. And like Izzo says, they've been coming after them all year.
Right.
So State's got to get that organized, find out what they can do to keep them together. I know that there's no question these guys feel a strong camaraderie. They've had fun this year. How was Carson Cooper after the game?
He's sad for Jaden Akins because I forgot that those guys played together at Ypsilanti Prep. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I always forget about that. And Carson Cooper was devastated because he felt like Jaden Akins gave him so much. But also, I think he was talking about he wants to be more of a leader. He wants to have more ownership on this team, have a real voice, and he feels like that's something he can do next year.
Yes, he can.
And I think when you think of guys that have come a long way throughout the course of the season, there's times early in the first third of the season where he really struggled, with some of his minutes, and maybe he wasn't getting as many minutes as he wanted. But I think he's steadily gotten better and better, and defensively he's been, rock solid this year. He's another guy that had fun playing, and his self-confidence is kind of, it's really taken off in the last half of the year. And we've covered these guys long enough, or covered college sports long enough. You can see when a guy is growing up, and really becoming mature. Sometimes you don't notice it. Like Akins over the summer, I think he grew up a lot, and he's a little bit quieter. But Carson Cooper's becoming more vocal, and I think he's going to be a team, like a kind of maybe a rare team leader. For a lot of times, big guys aren't the voice in the room. A lot of times it's the guards that are doing the talking. But Carson Cooper and Jackson Kohler, those two guys have some leadership ability, and they've had a lot of sweat equity this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can't remember the last time I saw this many tears from a losing Michigan State team. Holloman, Kohler, Akins, Richardson, and probably more that I didn't see.
And it wasn't because it was because of the loss in something, but it's the not being part of that experience, because a lot of these guys, everybody that played sports, you kind of remember your favorite teams are the ones that you had the best teammates. And I think that this is one of those rare instances where Michigan State was a high achiever, winning 30 games, getting the Elite Eight, winning the Big Ten championship. They had a high achieving season, but they also had like a off the charts team season where everyone was like, connected and bought in and really cared about each other, and there was nobody left out or anything like that. And that's what I think the sadness is about, that they won't be able to work and grind and keep this going, because it is so special and so rare. And one of the questions I asked a lot of those guys is, do you guys take the time to appreciate that what you did this year was bigger than basketball? It was, you had the team, you had the winning element, but you also brought joy to a lot of people, because at a time where people are like kind of getting tired of college sports because of the transactional mercenary type deal. This was Michigan State was an outlier. They were a team that a lot of people can get behind and feel really good about, and make people feel good about college sports again. And that's kind of rare. Detroit Tigers last year, same way. A bunch of young guys that don't know any better. And this is a team that I think they brought joy to a lot of people.
They're close team, close to getting over the top here. Very good team, very accomplished team. 30 wins, like you said. And in my opinion, not a team that ever reached their A game. They never really harnessed that A game for 40 minutes. But it was very good and very accomplished despite that. Right. Won a Big Ten title, 17-3. It's great how consistent they were putting those wins together. Izzo's only had 6 teams that won 30 games. So this is one of them. I don't know how many of those 30-win teams went to the Elite Eight. Maybe only 4 of them.
It's amazing. So, yeah, you say that they didn't get their A game because you can see like a lot of these guys are developing pieces, but at the same time, they never took a night off either. No. You look at, like how close all these games were. It would have been really easy, given this environment, for it to snowball and it to be a 20, 25 or 30.
And when it was 23-8, I thought Michigan State's going to make a comeback, because you guys have watched Michigan State for decades, and Izzo teams, when they get down in the first half, they make a comeback.
Right, but you can also go in stages where you make a comeback and then you get counterpunched at the end, and But these guys fought, and they have done that all season long. They've haven't had a single game where they've lost by. Everything has been single digits, mm-hmm. and that's increasingly rare as well. So it's kind of weird to say that they hadn't reached their full potential. At the same time, they
reached the potential in terms of the number of wins and winning the Big Ten and all those things, but they never played their A game, in my opinion. I thought that they never really played their full blast, kick butt, Akins, Richardson, Holloman shooting, Kohler defense. Right. They didn't have that game out. They won just, strength in numbers and certain guys rising up and getting it done. Fiddler today, man, he made some plays that ignited the comeback when they were down 23-8. Good for him. Made that 3-pointer, almost made another one. Yeah, he did some good things.
Yeah, he was shooting. The other day I was watching him during a little Ole Miss game, watching him at halftime when he came out shooting, and he didn't miss a single three from when I was watching. And the shot looks good. It'll be interesting to see what these guys do, like in Europe or whatever. But Kohler's another guy that we didn't mention that has a chance to be. I think he's grown a ton in every aspect of his game, but I think he has a chance to be like a really, really tough guy to cover. Because he's got the combination of athleticism, strength, and
touch. He's got some touch.
And it's developing. But I think he has a chance, and I didn't know if this was ever going to be the case, but I think he has a chance to be an elite defender. And that combination is really exciting, because he had a couple great defensive plays today where, block shots or whatever that were just like, they were really tough to do. But the fact that I think by next year he will truly be able to guard anybody on the court.
Yeah. And next year you've got, assuming Kohler, Carson Cooper, McCulloch, and then your fourth big, you spent a lot of month of March with Kohler as your 4, so you've got that flexibility. You got Cam Ward coming in as a freshman, gives you some flexibility. See what happens with Xavier Booker, but those 3 plus Kohler gives you something. Now you get into the portal season, so Michigan State's got to make sure they hang on to Holloman, hang on to Kohler. And that's part of the college game these days. I'm sure Michigan State fans will want him to.
And I think that Holloman this game is going to drive him. And he's a guy that's worked really hard, but he is a leader on the team, and this is going to drive him. I think he and Jeremy Fears are going to put in a ton of hours this summer to get better in different areas.
I expect Fears to be a first-team All-Big Ten guy next year.
Yeah, Absolutely. I mean, he is a dynamic point guard. I think he's just scratching the surface, and he is going to be a good leader. And I think this experience, and Holloman's a good leader too, man. Those guys are, those guys get after it. If you have two of those guys lead, you got a lot of captain material coming back. And I think Cohen Carr is going to be a guy that takes a step as a leader. But this team could be special. I don't know what's. I don't even want to bring up the Xavier Booker situation. But
Richardson's going to be an interesting one. That could be a big difference.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
If he does move on, they're going to have to go out and get some guards.
Right.
That's going to be a big deal.
Have to add one more if Richardson leaves. Yeah. All right. Anything else, Paul? Man, it's been a great season. Nothing else? It's been a great season. Fun to cover this team. Like I echo what you say about that. It's been a great run. Very accomplished team. Elite Eight was a great season for this Michigan State team that I didn't see coming because I didn't know what Fears was going to be back in November. Didn't know what kind of horsepower he would have. We didn't know Richardson was going to be this good. When the season first started and we heard that Kohler would likely be a power forward, I was like, well, can he guard power forwards? Most of the season he could. Against Bryant and New Mexico he could not, and that's part of what this tournament's all about. But he's developing as a face-up scorer with all that low post package that he has there. But really, it was his first full season. We didn't know what that was going to look like. All those things that I just mentioned, plus Cohen Carr, came up aces pretty much. But they in terms of what I thought was possible in October and November. Did it just shut off? Anything else? No. All right, for Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia, with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.